bad matchup in the quarterfinals, sneaking by Merfolk. Some pretty bad draws for his opponent, but again, as we like to say, that's all part of it.
I mean, sneaking by it, he didn't drop a single game to Merfolk. That's some pretty good prowess with the deck.
I'm inclined to agree, as Mann is going to begin things off here with an Underground C. Our second semifinal match is underway here from New Jersey. Gitaxian Probe is where Josh Taylor's going to start. He's already got the pen ready. He's going to mark himself down to 19. Take a look at what Stephen Mann's working with. You'll find a Disfigure, an Abrupt Decay, a Polluted Delta, a Tropical Island, a Daze, and a Dig Through Time. Very reactive hand here for Mann.
Yeah, so Sultai Delver can afford to be a control deck in this matchup, mainly because they have the true finisher in terms of Tarmogoyf. So if he can Abrupt Decay and Disfigure the early drops, cast Dig Through Time to get to the late game, Tarmogoyf should bring it home. One
thing that Mann has as well in his deck list is one copy of True Name Nemesis, and that certainly plays a big role in things too. So he's got a pretty good hand, though it is reactive. Now here is a Wasteland from Taylor to knock out that Underground C. Mann will draw a card. Looks like he picked up another copy of Abrupt Decay.
All right, so the first part, which is often the case in Delver Mirrors, is there's a challenge to make sure that both players get to play the game. There's a lot of Wasteland, a lot of land-light decks. So you want to see, okay, can you get your colors? Can you get your lands into play? And if so, then we'll start to interact with each other's spells.
Here's another Probe. The new card, as mentioned, is an Abrupt Decay. But a quick update, Tropical Island, 2 Abrupt Decays, Dig Through Time, Daze, and Disfigure.
And just look at how well this matches up. We see a second Wasteland from Joshua, but in the front of his hand, he's got multiple copies of Delver Secrets and just can't even go for them, mainly because there's a Disfigure and 2 Abrupt Decays in waiting. That's terrible news if you're Joshua Taylor.
For Taylor, he's got to go over the top of that card with one of his 2 Gurmag Anglers, and he does have 2 of those in his deck list this weekend. Young Pyromancer doesn't even line up particularly well against what Steve has in his hand right now.
Right, Gurmag Angler is Joshua's best attempt at a Tarmogoyf impersonation.
Mann is considering his options with this Tropical Island because it's the only other land in his hand at this point, and he's staring at a Wasteland. So, you know, there's no guarantee that Taylor will activate that Wasteland, but does Mann actually want to hold that land? Does he want to play that land? I think that's what he's deciding right now.
It's an interesting choice on his part. It looks like he opted to not go for the land.
Interesting. Taylor's going to discard for the turn. Just discards a Daze, so some very quick back and forth here between these 2 players.
Well, I believe Taylor kept a hand of 2 lands, both Wasteland, and then multiple copies of Gitaxian Probe, thinking that this is a very strong hand. Double Wasteland's great when you're on the play, but even though it didn't have blue mana, now it's a small risk on his part, but it's one that is going to hit him really hard.
Here's a Ponder for Mann off the Tropical Island, so that's his land for the turn.
You just see in waiting in Joshua's hand, he has a Ponder and 2 copies of Delver of Secrets for whenever that island decides to show up.
Yeah, fetch lands, blue sources, a lot of them in the deck, of course. It is a Delver deck after all, but he has not found one just yet.
Does make discarding Daze an easier play if you don't have an island.
Ponder the spell being cast, Taylor is thinking it over. Leads me to believe he might have a copy of Force of Will in hand as he's moving those cards around a little bit. So there is Force of Will removing Delver Secrets. Delver actually a pretty easy card to remove to Force of Will given
exactly.
Steve Mann's hand right now.
That said, Steve's got to be happy to score a 2 for 1 here. He's got Joshua to use a Force of Will on a Ponder, so I want to point this out because at first this looks overly aggressive from Joshua's side. This isn't a card you Force of Will. You Force of Will Tarmogoyfs. But if Joshua's hand just needs time, it's kind of a bust up. This hand is a bust up, right? It didn't get there. What he needs to hope is that maybe Steve's hand's equally awkward. I mean, Steve did just skip a land drop. And if Steve's hand is equally awkward, what it means is that maybe Joshua can counter the cantrip, Wasteland the Tropical, and maybe they both just stare at each other for a couple turns. Joshua draws some lands and everything's fine.
Steve's turn very interesting here because he's dazing the Force of Will, even though he knows that Joshua can pay for it. Part of the reason he's doing that is because he wants to be able to pick up the Tropical Island and have it not be hit by Wasteland. So now he's just going to do that and then simply pass the turn back. So very interesting turn there for Steve.
Yeah, he was willing to spend the days just to not get Wastelanded.
Yeah. Taylor just going to have to pass the turn back. Still has not found a land yet. Mann picked up a copy of Liliana the Veil.
This is a great game of cat and mouse between the 2. Look at the value Steve is placing on that second land.
Yeah.
He's skipped land drops twice. He's spent a days to just pick it up. And it's paying off right now.
Yeah, this is a weird back and forth between these 2 players. I've been watching Legacy for a long time. Haven't seen much like this. Now, there's a Polluted Delta, which is great against Wasteland.
Well, that's perfect. So what Steve has, what this game was a race to a fetch land. For Steve, now that he plays the fetch land, he can make a Liliana next turn. I don't even think he'll care that he gets wastelanded.
Yeah, well, Taylor with an interesting draw. It's wasteland number 3.
All right. Now, that said, though, if this Liliana, the Steve can play next turn, resolves, it'll just carry the game away.
Yeah.
Sure, we can trade all our lands as long as I get a Planeswalker.
Yep. Spell Pierce the draw here for Mann.
Now he has to debate. If he has no way to protect Liliana, maybe he waits until he has a 4th land and then he can protect her with Spell Pierce. On the other side, you think about whatever spell he tries to resolve, 2 fetches, 2 possible blown up lands. We're getting very close to Dig Through Time.
Very true. I think Mann is aware of that as well. Now Taylor's going to look at his hand a little bit longer here because it doesn't appear as though he has found a land, so he might have to discard.
I mean, a gamble for Taylor that in most situations would have paid off turns ago.
Yeah, I'd say you would expect it to pay off by now.
Yeah. Yeah, this is, when you keep a hand with no blue sources, you think, well, my top 10 cards are not blue sources. I will probably lose. Taylor has drawn nearly 10 cards without a blue source. He hasn't technically lost yet, which I think as far as that's concerned, he's got to be happy that this game is still within reach.
Yeah, he hasn't gotten run out by anything. We haven't seen like a Delver flip or anything, or Tarmogoyf come down and run rampant.
Yeah, I mean, if Steve had just simply played 2 lands, played a Delver with an extra mana up, I mean, Josh had no reasonable response to that.
Yeah, we have not seen that. So Wasteland's going to take her a Tropical Island.
That was interesting. Steve played the 3rd land, did not cast a spell. It's that the fetch land in his hand made him okay trading lands with Joshua. I did somewhat expect to see him use Liliana of the Veil in the situation. But I suppose when you have Dig Through Time, what's the rush on any of this?
Yeah, perhaps when he drew the Spell Pierce, he decided, I want to be able to do this with 4 mana. That looks to be Taylor's entire turn, so we'll see if Mann ever is going to make a move here.
Well, what Mann could have done, what he could have done there is if he has a mana floating right now, he can crack both fetch lands, he can Dig Through Time, and he'll have Spell Pierce mana up.
Sure? No, that's very true. That's very, very true.
Which seems huge, as he could Dig Through Time into more lands, a Tarmogoyf would be beautiful here.
Yeah. He's going to sacrifice the other Delta now as well.
I think that's what's happening.
I think an Underground Sea is where he'll go. Yep.
Yeah, remember, there's an extra mana floating off that Wasteland, or off that Tropical Island that was destroyed by Wasteland.
Now keep in mind one other thing as well. Steve Mann, he's been targeted by Wasteland a couple of times this game. He has 3 Tropical Islands and 3 Underground Seas. That's it. And then 4 Wastelands and, of course, tap for mana. But
Right, so there's 1 of each down.
now here's the Dig Through Time.
Right, so he uses the floating blue and the 6 in the graveyard.
See if Taylor wants to maybe battle here if he has a Force of Will. Wouldn't surprise you if he does because he's been sitting there.
He has to battle over it, but I mean...
I don't think he has a Force.
Right.
So Mann's going to take a look at the top 7 cards and then take 2 with him.
Does mean he'll get Wastelanded again, so he may just have to take some lands off this.
Steve Mann's found a Wasteland. He's also found a lot of cards that are really nice here. Brainstorm, Misty Rainforest, Tarmogoyf, Force of Will, Wasteland. A lot of options here for Steve.
I wonder, okay, so he's going to take the fetch land. The question is whether he takes 2 lands or whether he takes fetch land plus Tarmogoyf. If he takes fetch land plus Tarmogoyf, he will ensure that he has a Tarmogoyf next turn, which is beautiful on this board. But I really like the patience on Steve's side when he decided what his payoff card would be. He finally hit the 3rd land. Okay, we could go for Liliana here, or Dig Through Time could be my payoff card. By picking Dig Through Time here, I think he's ensuring that his next payoff card also resolves. We'll see if Joshua wants to Wasteland again.
Yeah, I think that's the question here.
I do think he almost has to. It's because he has no other reasonable play.
Yeah, they're not doing much else. It can assist in the casting of Young Pyromancer and maybe a few other spells, but the Wastelands aren't doing too much, so he's going to go reach in. See if he wants to knock mana off of black or green mana.
Won't matter. Man picked up a fetch land off that dig. And if you're Joshua Taylor, you know it. That if there was one there, it was taken.
Have to discard a Lightning Bolt for the turn. Will Taylor. Mann will take a draw. It's been a very strange game thus far. Drew a copy of Flooded Strand.
And what a Tarmogoyf. He'll face down 0 permanents.
Yeah, a dream come true. The question, however, is does Mann want to cast it this turn? I suppose if he does have Daze in his hand, that's perfect backup for it. But one thing we know about Steve Mann, very methodical player. He's going to think everything through. Not going to make any decision too quickly. Especially with a lot on the line here this weekend. He'll start with the Misty.
Right, so we go through his hand. He does have a Tarmogoyf he picked up off Dig Through Time, a Spell Pierce, 2 Abrupt Decays, a Disfigure, and a Liliana of the Veil.
He'll sacrifice his Misty Rainforest. Tropical Island's going to be on the way here in just a moment. That's his 3rd one. It's his last one.
All right, so both his colors online. Of note, this is his last Tropical Island, so if at any point Josh finds that 4th copy of Wasteland, Steve will be out of green mana, outside of Deathrite Shamans.
And there is the Tarmogoyf. We'll get the size on it. It is a 3/4 right now, so we've got instant, land, sorcery in the graveyard. No creatures just yet.
Back here, and
Jeez.
it's just more discarding from Joshua.
Yeah, discards a Lightning Bolt. A tough first game here for Taylor, because I think I would keep his opening hand too. And you've got 2 probes, a couple copies of Wasteland and blue cards, and they're all cantrips.
Absolutely. All you need to find is 1 fetch land, 1 any land. All his lands make blue.
Yeah,
outside of Wastelands.
Yeah, you would think that he would run into 1 by now, but he has definitely not done that, as you can tell. So now here's Liliana. Let's see if this resolves.
Joshua at least has cards to discard, but this is a tough for him.
Yeah, Mann's got cards to discard too. And it looks like Liliana is going to resolve. Part of the reason you play that pre-combat too is because if Taylor does have Force Will, it puts a Planeswalker in the graveyard to make Tarmogoyf larger, so you can hit for more damage. It's good sequencing, even though it does seem obvious. Taylor does discard a creature.
So Tarmogoyfs are for 4 now.
Yep. So we're head Josh's way.
And still hasn't hit the land. At this point, Tarmogoyf is the cleanup crew.
Yep. Really, anything could get it done. Dismember the draw. Mann playing 3 copies of that card in his main deck this weekend.
And that's huge. You don't normally see that commitment to a card like Dismember.
Takes care of the Gurmag Angler, man.
Yeah, and I mean, when you think of the fact that Steve's playing 3 of them, and that his remaining 2 opponents in this tournament are Grixis Delver, his Dismembers look brilliant.
Yeah. Mann will tick up Liliana. Both players will discard. Disfigure down. So is Ponder. Taylor will draw. And no more. Joshua Taylor is unable to ever draw a blue land. Steve Mann does win game number 1 here over Joshua Taylor. Sultai Delver up a game here over Grixis Delver, which means it's time to take a look at the sideboards here for both players, and we are going to start with Joshua Taylor. A Needle, Static Caster, Dreaded Knight, an Ancient Grudge, a Dismember, a Flusterstorm, and Vidilian Click of Thoughtseize, 2 Cabal Therapies, 2 Surgical Extractions, 3 Pyroblast. Outside of actually, drawing some blue mana, what do we like here for game number 2 for Josh?
Well, one of the things that you look at Grixis Delver, especially when it wants to deal with Tarmogoyf, is you ask whether or not they're playing any cards like Terminate, Go for the Throat, Smother, some Doomblade, something like that can actually take down a Tarmogoyf. So unfortunately for Joshua Taylor, he really doesn't have much of that. He'll bring in his 1 of Dismember in the sideboard because there's a lot of situations where that can take down a Tarmogoyf. But you look at his other cards, his Izzet Static Caster, Ancient Grudge, Dread of Night. These were designed for different matchups, and they just won't play here very much. I don't even believe he wants very many copies of a card like Pyroblast, because when you think about the cards that matter in Steve's deck, your Abrupt Decays and Tarmogoyfs, it just doesn't function against them. Steve's important cards tend to not be blue. Now, Josh might bring in some of them anyway simply because he wants to win a Dig Through Time fight, but he does not have many options in his sideboard.
It's not the home run you think it would be in a Grixis matchup.
No, Vendilion Click is okay here. He'll probably bring it in, but he has nothing great in the matchup.
Grafdigger's Cage, Pith and Needle, Notion Thief, Trine Nemesis, Dread of Night, Dark Blast, Golgari Charm, Vendilion Click, Life and Alone. Those are all one-ofs to go along with 2 Flusterstorms, 2 Surgical Extractions, and 2 Thought Seizes here for Steve Mann.
Now this is an interesting spot. So Steve Mann, unlike Joshua Taylor, he has options. As we kind of saw game 1, I think Steve envisions himself as the control deck in this matchup, and post-board he'll make himself more like that. So True Name Nemesis, that's strong here because it's such a powerful finisher. If he wants an additional one, he'll go ahead and use that. Outside of that, he does have some interesting, real grindy options he can go to. If he wants to just be in a control role, he can use cards like Dark Blast, first of all, which is great. It kills young Pyromancers, it kills Delvers. He can board that in. He can go as far to board in Life from the Loam and start to try to just wasteland Joshua out of these games.
Yeah, we saw Joshua doing all the wastelanding, but Steve actually has the mini Life from the Loam engine, and we know Joshua's deck list, there are no basics over there.
Yeah, I would think he'll go to become this grindy control Delver style deck.
I think he's well situated to do that. Those Dismembers, having 3 of those in the main deck, along with the Disfigure, Abrupt Decay, all that stuff, I like his placement for doing that.
Well, I think there's no threat in Joshua's deck that Steve has difficulty answering. You look at Gurmag Angler, Steve can counter it, he has 3 Dismembers. Young Pyromancer, well, he has a Dark Blast, he has just Disfigure, he has Abrupt Decay. Same things kill Delver of Secrets. And Deathrite Shaman, yeah, we have some removal for that too. On top of that, he's got True Name Nemesis, Tarmogoyf. His threats are just not answerable on Joshua's side.
These players are going to shuffle up here for game number 2. Joshua Taylor will be on the play. Very quickly, we will talk about who's headed to the Players' Championship. Barely made it. He, I would say, crawled across the finish line because he got really sick on Friday and wasn't even able to make day 2 as being under the weather influenced his play. But Danny Jessup got the job done, traveled a lot, played a lot, won a lot. He's going to the Players' Championship.
So congratulations to him. He faced some late game threats there from Ross Miriam and Logan Mize, but in the end, the leader coming into the Invitational was able to hang on to the points lead, and he is the 6th player in our Players' Championship.
We're going to see him there at the end of the year with a bunch of people. Alion Trazi, he's our Season 2 Invitational champion. Season 1 was Jacob Wilson. Jim Davis and Kevin Jones are our points leaders. And then the champ, he's down there. That's Brad Nelson. He gets to try to defend the title. 16 competitors, $50,000, December 19th and the 20th in Roanoke, Virginia, at the Star City Game Center. Both these players take a look at their opening hands. Misty Rainforest is where Taylor is going to begin for game number 2, which is a big change from game number 1. Since he gets to play blue spells this time, must be really nice.
Misty Rainforest.
What a feeling getting to actually get to cast your spells. There's an Underground Sea.
See what he gets to do with them this game, I suppose.
Assuming that his lands survive and Steve doesn't wasteland them all, then he will get to cast spells this game.
Look, his hand still is on an aggressive route. Deathrite Shaman's the play. He has Days left in his hand, along with, looks like he has boarded Thought Seize in for the matchup.
Abrupt Decay the draw here for Mann.
Well, I suppose if he expects Steve to be a control deck, well, then you might as well Thought Seize him.
Sure. A lot of juicy targets. That is a Flooded Strand. Mann down to 19. We'll see what he wants to find. He'll go with an Underground Sea. See if maybe Steve has a Deathrite Shaman of his own to keep up with Joshua.
And yeah, look at this. The approach from Steve is much like game 1. Cards in his hand are things like Disfigure, Abrupt Decay, Force of Will.
Well, Joshua came prepared this game because he's got a Daze here. Now, Steve might fight back because he does have Force of Will plus blue card. And Joshua has a copy of Wasteland in hand, so he could go Daze this, kill your land. But Steve is going to aggressively try to kill that Deathrite Shaman.
Getting rid of Dig Through Time shows that Steve really respects this Deathrite Shaman. If you're on a control deck strategy, Dig Through Time is your finisher.
This is pretty notable here. Steve with just 4 cards left.
Yeah.
Taylor, I think, is going to use that Wasteland, yeah.
And, all right, once again, we're on the 0 permanent board.
Yeah, and Steve has no more lands. Drew a copy of Dark Blast, has to pass the turn back.
Josh with another Wasteland in hand that he can't even put to use. So now we'll see if he can make a threat to try to get this. He has a Delver of Secrets, which Steve would have an answer to were that land black.
That's a Tropical Island. That is not what the doctor ordered. Now, Delver isn't the end of the world for Steve Mann because he does have a copy of Abrupt Decay in hand, but we know that Taylor has a Wasteland in hand for that Tropical Island, so he's going to have to make the most of this trop.
And if Steve can fade a flip for one turn, maybe he can Dark Blast this Delver. Dark Blast is an excellent card in the matchup. It deals with Young Pyromancer, and once you're ahead, it deals with Delver of Secrets. But he hasn't done the second part of that. He's not really ahead right now.
You can take care of a Deathrite Shaman in certain situations. You can't take care of the Angler, though. That's a little tough. You might see a main phase Brainstorm here from Steve, wanting to play around Spell Pierce, another cheap counter magic while the shields are down. There is the main phase Brainstorm.
And cannot afford to have this get Spell Pierced.
Yeah, so you know, that's probably the reason he does it now.
Or Red Blasted, or a lot of, I mean, there's only one Spell Pierce in the main. Remember, they have access to each other's deck lists. There are a lot of Red Blasts on the board, and can't really have those happen either. Now, if he's Brainstorm locked here, this is a nightmare.
Did not get a great look. I know there's a Thoughtseize that he picked up.
Oh my, no, there's not a land here.
I don't think there is either.
And there's a Wasteland in Joshua's hand. That means that it's at least 2 attacks worth from Delver, probably 3 turns of attacks. If this flips, that's a 9 damage play. It may be too much to overcome.
Checking for Delver. Miss number 1. Steve Mann does not know how important that is, that missed. I think he knows now.
Now he does.
Here's a Thoughtseize, Dismember, Delver of Secrets, Dark Blast, Thoughtseize for Steve as well, and then a Deathrite Shaman. So somebody really needed that land.
I mean, yeah. And when you look at this Thoughtseize, there's nothing that Joshua is particularly concerned with. I imagine he'll take Deathrite Shaman to further go after Steve's resources. As long as he doesn't take Dark Blast, he's great here.
Yeah. Because if you're Steve, if he takes Dark Blast, you get to dredge Dark Blast and get by
you're
those
not
2 cards.
Brainstorm locked anymore.
Yeah.
It's great. Dark Blast on the surface looks like it's a good answer to Delver, especially since it hasn't flipped, but you cannot take that here.
The other thing that's interesting, too, is that for what it's worth, Joshua Taylor doesn't know that Steve Mann doesn't have 2 lands on his deck.
Exactly.
So this could definitely influence his decision.
Perfect pick, though.
That said,
Joshua.
I like selecting Deathrite Shaman there quite a bit. Here's an attack for 1. Man will draw. He'll just have to pass.
So that was one of the 3 free attacks Joshua gets.
Jeez. Second
Second one, Man borrowed time here.
0 for 2 on Delver flips.
And we're looks to be in a land screw versus land flood situation. Joshua cracking this fetch land to thin his deck. I understand the reasoning. If he has an end step play here, it's great.
I would rather do this with a Delver trigger.
Exactly. If you see another land on top of your deck, get rid of that thing. Thinning your deck only matters if you're going to draw the land. So
there's a Ponder.
Well, that's going to do great, though. So now he gets the flip Delver. Ponder should help him get by this land flood that he has going on.
And he'll get to cast the Ponder, so he'll take a look at 3 cards. We'll see if he wants to keep them or not. As you mentioned, he is flooding pretty badly here, is Taylor. He's got a lot of lands in his hand. That said, again, if you're Steve Mann, you were expecting to probably take 9 points of damage there, not what's going to be a total of 5.
Yep.
Yeah. Taylor going to keep with the Ponder.
Now, to be fair, there's no guarantee if you're Steve Mann that this next card's a land, but at least you don't know it isn't.
Yeah. That's a lot better feeling. At least you've got the chance to draw a land. Here comes the Delver. Man down at 13. Well, that's a good draw. Underground Sea.
A turn too late on the Dark Blast for Steve.
Though I do believe he has Disfigure in hand. I think that and Dismember.
So one thing he can do is that he can use, if you want, Disfigure's the clean answer to the Insectile Aberration. He can 2-for-1 himself to get rid of it. With Dark Blast, if you upkeep Dark Blast, dredge it, and recast, you can deal 2 with 1. It does cost you your draw step for the turn.
More importantly, it's 2 mana, and he's only got 1 at this point.
Exactly.
He's going to fire off with something here. He'll go with Thoughtseize. Interesting. Looking to clear the path.
And it may just be that he doesn't have another option he's thrilled about.
And he does have a removal spell for the Delver in hand, but I guess maybe he wants to make sure that the path is clear. That is notable.
There's only 1 Disfigure in the 75, and it's in his graveyard.
Disfigure in the graveyard might be a Dismember in hand, but this is equally as notable.
And so this is a telling play from Joshua. So Steve thought seized him. Joshua allowed Steve to see the hand when there's a brainstorm with a fetch land up. The tell here is that, remember, Joshua pondered last turn, drew one card and kept 2 on top, is that Joshua is happy with the 2 cards on top of his deck. Happy enough to let a brainstorm get thought seized.
That's exactly what's going to happen, because Steve has no interest in taking Pyroblast, and he obviously cannot select Misty Rainforest, so now we're just going to head back Taylor's way. Taylor not cracking the fetch land, so he wanted to draw this card, which is, I believe, is a Young Pyromancer.
Well, and Young Pyromancer, I'm surprised he even wants to draw that in the face of a Dark Blast that he knows about in Steve's hand. It doesn't seem very good in this situation.
Yeah.
Now, what does seem good is the continued shots of 3 that Steve is taking.
Yep, Delver did come over. Mann's down to 8 now.
Makes casting a card like Dismember especially painful, but Steve may just have to do it.
I think Taylor may be passing the turn back without casting his Pyromancer.
Like I said, casting it into Dark Blast doesn't seem good, but I'm not positive it's getting better. So the reason you'd wait is if you want to draw more cantrips and get extra value out of this. At the same time, that's only incremental value. And what I like about the play is you're tying up Steve's mana for a turn, and perhaps it's all his mana. So in a way, this is a lava spike.
Yeah, that's the part of it that I do like, is if you do choose to play it, you're basically saying, okay, you have to kill this now, so your turn is tied to Dark Blasting this, and that means my Delver gets to get in, and that is, as you mentioned, just that's a lava spike.
Right, Steve's draw was Tarmogoyf. So if he Dark Blasts the Pyromancer, he'll go to 5. He does have a Dismember in hand. He could kill the Delver and go to 1. But then we get into really bad issues like Steve can't crack fetch lands.
Yeah.
You know, getting out of this land screw becomes so much more difficult. Looks like he'll pass.
Maybe an upkeep Dark Blast? Yeah.
There we go. If it's going to get countered, might as well make Joshua pay mana for it. The Blast will take down the 2-1, though. And we see the 3rd card that Joshua had queued up. Get to see what it is in just a second.
Yeah, only card in Joshua's hand coming in the turn was Pyroblast, so no fear of it getting countered. But at the same time, you could have just, I believe with the wording on Pyroblast, you can just cast it. So you could have just made a token.
Interesting choice here by Steve. His draw was Ponder. If he casts Ponder, it'll get Pyroblasted. He'll go to 2. Then if he top decks that way to make green, he can go to 1 and kill the Delver.
Yep.
Alternatively, he can Dismember the Delver right now and go to 1.
I like
They're both
casting.
bad.
Yeah, I like casting Ponder.
I mean, and we have to put casting as in some pretty liberal quotes there because it is going to get blasted.
Yeah.
If your opponent's stuck on 1 land and tries to Ponder, there is no way I'm letting him do that.
Yeah, same. Also, Joshua's got an idea of what his hand is because of the Thoughtseize.
Exactly.
So he knows what he's trying to work towards.
I would assume that if Steve gets 2 mana, even if I didn't know his hand, that there was either an Abrupt Decay or a Tarmogoyf waiting for me. And probably an Abrupt Decay because that's it's the perfect spell on this board. Yeah, you can't possibly let him look at extra cards now.
No.
You're so close to winning.
Taylor going to sacrifice the land here. Go down to 15.
So Steve will need to draw a fetch land next turn, or just a green, some way to make green. If so, he can Abrupt Decay the Delver. He may go to 1 for it. He'll go to at least 2.
But I'd rather go to 1 with an extra land versus not.
Exactly. And then down the road, the Dismember might still be a real card. You know, you can pay 3 for it.
Yep. Perfectly reasonable play. Here comes the Delver. Mann's down to 2. And that'll take care of this particular game. A top deck Lightning Bolt means that Joshua Taylor does win game number 2 over Steve Mann. Grixis Delver takes care of Sultai Delver, which means we're getting ready here for game number 3. We'll take a look at the sideboards again. Anything you think change here, given play, draw? Mann will be on the play this go around.
All right, so if we had a question as to whether or not Steve was going to go to Dark Blast, we now know he does. Is he going to go as far as to go to Life from the Loam? I think it's actually pretty reasonable here. In that sort of game, if you ever, that game, despite the fact that Joshua won it, it showed what an uphill battle it is for Joshua. He had to keep Steve off a second land for the entire game, and you did feel that if at any point Steve had just gotten even a second land, that game was going to turn around very quickly. Abrupt Decay would hit the Delver, and then Steve would stop caring about the land drops. So 1 resolved Life from the Loam could be big for him. What's interesting to me is if this means Josh wants to re-sideboard towards something like Surgical Extraction. Dark Blast is actually very good against the deck, and so is Life from the Loam. And while the cards are narrow, having maybe one of it in your deck as something you could go toward may be reasonable.
Interesting. A little surgical action, huh?
I don't tip it. So Surgical in fair matchups is risky at best, but Dark Blast can lock you out of the game, and you can't afford that. So I don't know. Maybe it's still pretty narrow, but it's possible.
We'll see. I mean, you can see both players right now. They're in the tank.
Yeah.
They're moving some cards around. Some things are definitely changing based off of play, draw, and what they saw in those games. So we'll get a better idea of what they're working with when game number 3 does begin. Though we do want to mention what these players are playing for here this weekend. We can see the invitational payout. First place is $10,000, 35 Open Series points. Your likeness on a card, as well as an invite to our Players' Championship at the end of the year. Second place, $4,000, 30 Open Series points. Third and fourth, which these players have locked up no matter the result, $3,000 and 25 Open Series points. So a healthy payout here at our Season 3 Invitational, but only one person's going to walk away with $10,000, those 35 Open Series points, their likeness on a card, and that invite to the Players' Championship.
Yeah, that's the big one.
Yep.
Chance to win the year's end championship, steal that title off of Brad Nelson.
Yeah, the defending champion, Roanoke's own. So looking forward to that tournament at the end of the year. Right now, we already got one player into the finals. We got Grixis Delver waiting for somebody.
Yeah, Alex Pastecki with Grixis Delver. He's waiting in the finals. Had an impressive performance today here. Had a clean sweep in his top 8 match. Defeated Matthew Long in a Delver mirror. He beat up a blue-red Delver deck. Then made short work of Gabriel Svachkin 3-1, and I'll tell you that one was an uphill battle for Gabriel. Alex looked like he was in control all match.
Grixis Delver is, I don't know if it's the best Delver deck because things are kind of fluid in Legacy. Teamer Delver is certainly good from week to week. We're seeing Sultai Delver here in the hands of Steve Mann, and Blue Red Delver actually put 2 copies in the top 8. But I'll tell you, Grixis Delver has really impressed me this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that it's a Delver deck that can do very well against Miracles, do very well against Omnitel, and be reasonable against other Delver decks really shows its strength. Steve Mann looks to be one iteration ahead of them. He's gone with the Sultai Delver, which is the least popular version we saw this weekend, but it's particularly good against Grixis. And now that the remaining players in the tournament is just him and a bunch of Grixis Delver players, he may get paid off really well for that meta call.
Well, game number 3 will be underway here in just a moment. If you are just joining us, Cedric Phillips, Matthias Hunt, along with Patrick Sullivan, Ken Crocker, Nick Miller on the sideboard, the rest of the SCG Live crew bringing you the Season 3 Invitational here from New Jersey at SCG Live, hashtag SCGINVI. For the rest of the weekend, which will be just a couple hours longer as we work our way towards crowning a champion here. Had some stars in the top 8, and Gerard Fabiano, Steve Mann currently playing, good friend of Gerard Fabiano, Joshua Taylor. It's been fun to watch thus far. Can't forget about Eric Smith, former Invitational champion. Unfortunately, he got dispatched in the quarterfinals.
And Joshua Taylor actually having to eliminate Gerard Fabiano in the top 8.
Never a great feeling having to knock your friend out. No one wants to do it.
It's hard when you're Gerard, though, because you're friends with about half the tournament. You know.
You make a very good point, actually, especially when you're in your hometown, too.
Right.
You're probably friends with maybe even more than half because he's in New Jersey. He grew where he lives and where he grew up is about 30 minutes from here.
You know, Eric Smith was in the top 8. He's won a Team Trios event, SCG event with Eric Smith, paired up against a different friend in the top 8.
Yeah, very true. Both players taking a look at the opener. Steve Mann will be on the play this game.
Yeah, so we do have Steve back on the play here. We haven't seen any of those early game Delver openings from Steve. All the things he's kept have just been some removal spells and some draw spells. He's not, we're not seeing him curve Delver Secrets into anything, and it doesn't look like we're going to see that this game either.
It would not surprise me if he sideboarded Delver out.
Wow.
Dies to Bolt.
Sure.
Lightning and Forked. Dies to the blast effects as well. And he might just say, you know what? You have to beat my Tarmogoyf, which I know is really hard for you.
Look, this is what he's done again. Okay, Tarmogoyf, Dark Blast. So we have our finisher, we have our removal spell, we have a land, 2 Force of Wills, and our card draw, our Dig Through Time. It's a control deck here. You make a good point. I do doubt that the Delver Secrets are still in the deck.
It's just not so. It's not a tempo game for him. It's not an aggressive game. He can win with Deathrite Shaman, Tarmogoyf, grinding down with Liliana. He's got a Trine Nemesis that he can play. I think he really just wants to suit up for a really long game, but he can play a shorter game with just threats that are hard to answer.
Right, and I think there's some argument to see him put them back in when he's on the play, because the turn 1 Delver on the play is so powerful, but maybe he's gone away from that just in general.
Turn 2 here for Mann. We swear that's not a mannequin. He hasn't moved, but we swear that's a person. There he goes.
Steve Mann, known for his methodical pace.
Yep.
Doesn't have to play around Stifle here. No copies of that card in any of these 3 Delver decks.
There's a Wasteland.
I think what he had to choose to is he drew a Flooded Strand for the turn, so he could have gone for a turn 2 play, or played Wasteland and perhaps wasting Josh off a land.
Yeah, it might be time for Steve to do a little Wastelanding here. He's been the one being targeted by Wasteland a bunch.
Well, if Steve really envisions himself as the control deck in the matchup, I'm not even certain he has interest in Wastelanding. Wasteland makes colorless mana, and he has Dig Through Time, he has Tarmogoyf in his hand. Why trade lands? Why not just kill cards?
Sure, why try to mana screw him? We're going to play a long game anyway. So.
Steve will use the mana much better than Joshua will.
Very true.
And the draw, this is great, was a copy of Life from the Loam. So Steve has a Flooded Strand, a Scalding Tarn, and a Wasteland as his 3 lands. They all could hit the graveyard this turn, and he could get them all back. This already represents a draw 3.
And this is the kind of card that if you're Josh, you do want to counter and you don't want to counter, because what's the point in countering it?
It's just going to come back. Again.
Yeah. But it's having a very powerful effect on the game because it can get 3 lands back, those 2 fetch lands as you mentioned, and the Wasteland.
I mean, this is great. Now, it's such a good play. Steve may want to make sure the coast is clear before going for it, or he can go for it right now.
Well, you know, it's funny because a turn ago, I agreed with you that Wastelanding is probably not correct. You can just hang back. Let's play a longer game. I can use that mana. And now all of a sudden it's, oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Let's Wasteland him.
So Steve Wastelands the Volcanic Island. Joshua floats the mana, but Steve moves through combat.
So no more mana floating.
And now some fetch lands being cracked by Steve Mann. The Life from the Loam is in the works. I don't know if he's setting it up for this turn. He's vulnerable to something like Daze if he does it this turn. He still has Force of Will blue card in his hand.
Truth be told, I'd actually be all right if I'm Steve, if I think my opponent dazes my Loam, because he's got to pick up his land, set your land back. If you're Josh Taylor, I get to cast Loam again and dredge and all that stuff.
Yeah, and what he can do here, and this shows how great of a spot he's in, he could also just use Tarmogoyf as a test spell because the Loam is so strong right now. I mean, certainly if Joshua had a Daze, he'd Daze Tarmogoyf.
I see your argument there. If I'm Steve, I think I'm almost certainly casting Loam this turn because if it does get countered, I get to dredge, and then I'm even that much closer to Dig Through Time.
Right, you get close to Dig Through Time. I mean, not to mention this Loam plus Wasteland, that wins the game quickly against Grixis Delver.
Steve can get 2 Tropical Islands, not going to split it up, because if he were to get
Wastelanded,
that
green source, yeah. We'll see which one he goes for.
Well, he's moved Loam forward.
Yep. All right, big turn for Steve Mann. May I have all 3 of these?
If you're Joshua Taylor, you cannot be happy with this.
You can't let this happen if you have any choice in the matter.
I'm going to sacrifice Misty Rainforest, search up a land here.
It smells like a Daze.
Daze Pierce, I mean, something.
Yeah. He may have both. I'll be curious to see how much Steve wants to fight over the Loam. He does have Force plus blue card in his hand. At the same time, he may just let it get countered and go for it again and again and again.
Yeah, see, for me, if I'm in Steve's spot and I don't have an idea of what Josh's hand is, I don't think I'm aggressively going after this. I'm not. If there were a Delver on the table or something beating me down, sure, I would maybe counter back because it's super important to get online. But with no creature out there,
yeah,
we'll just dredge it and keep casting it.
The worst case scenario for Steve is that this gets countered and then Joshua untaps and wastelands one of Steve's lands. It means that he'd have to draw a second land to keep going after this.
There's the Spell Pierce.
If he was really worried about something like Daze or Spell Pierce, what he could have done is he could have not wastelanded Joshua. He could have just loamed back the 2 fetch lands. And then next time when he loamed, he could have gone for the wasteland plan. He's losing a lot of strength and a lot of value in the play. But if he wanted the certainty that this would happen, he could have done that.
Loma's going to get hit by Spell Pierce. Man not going to fight over it. Pass the turn back over to Taylor. Taylor will take a draw step.
So now Mann's question is, am I going to get wastelanded?
Yeah.
And I think the answer is absolutely.
It's tough. Because on one side, I can see wanting to wasteland him. On the other, I'm not in love with it because I'm playing against a deck that has life from the loam.
But Deathrite, if you want to get this life from the loam to be really ineffective, this Deathrite Shaman is a huge deal. Not only will it exile the life from the loam, it'll take away his wasteland. It'll really hurt the strategy. You see Steve respects it enough to try to Force of Will.
Yeah, he's going to try to. Taylor's going to daze back. Now will Taylor activate Wasteland is the question. The answer is yes. Things have changed in this game.
Steve's in a bind. He can't dredge life from the loam here. Yep. And he can't have life from the loam and a land. So even if he draws a land here, he won't get to have his life from the loam because Deathrite Shaman will take care of it. Now, if he has a kill spell for Deathrite Shaman, all right then.
Yeah. He did draw a copy of Polluted Delta, which means he can cast Tarmogoyf. He can cast Dig Through Time. He'd have to dig away everything but one card because he'd have 7 cards in the graveyard.
Well, once the life from the loam's gone, which Joshua will do main phase unless he wants Steve to dredge it, which I don't think he can allow, then the graveyard loses a lot of its utility, and sure, let's convert it into a Dig Through Time.
It just got a lot harder for Mann. Taylor's turn was a very, very good one. He'll start by sacrificing Polluted Delta, will Mann. We'll see what land he wants to get. Does have 1 Tropical left and then a couple copies of Underground Sea. He'll go with an Underground Sea.
All right. So he has 2 here. He gets to make a 2-drop. The fact that he has a second land will force Joshua's hand on exiling that life from the loam. Remember, there is still a Dark Blast in Steve's hand. So even if the loam gets exiled, he can continue to use the graveyard as a resource. It looks like it will just be Tarmogoyf. Now there is there's some pressure here. That land that Joshua picks up has to be able to produce black mana. Roosevelt can't. Yeah, well, no, that'll be fine, which it will.
Yeah, Underground Sea is the one that he's looking for.
Yeah.
Or, if he has a fetch in his hand, he can do that too, so. Either way, Taylor will take a draw step here. Tarmogoyf for 3/4 out of Lightning Bolt range. Good place to be.
Sure. Lightning Bolt does appear to be in Joshua's hands. He drew a fetch land for the turn.
And Tarmogoyf being a 3/4, it's not going to change. Ton of lands in the graveyard. Couple of sorceries and Gataxian Probe and Life and Loam, and then instants as well, so. Pretty safe there's a 3/4. Brainstorm here in Taylor's hand. He has another copy of Wasteland.
Right, so at least for this turn, Joshua's play, well, it's interesting because he has another Wasteland. I would say if he didn't have the Wasteland, it would be forced insofar as he'd have to exile that life from the loam. But with the Wasteland, he can waste Steve off a land. He can use Deathrite Shaman to make mana to perhaps cast something. And furthermore, to maybe exile the Wasteland out of Steve's graveyard, which is something he definitely wants to do. And he can go from there.
Here comes Tarmogoyf. Now he's got a Delver to play. This game has just shifted back and forth. Josh Taylor has a permanent on the battlefield, and in a weird way, he's doing really well for himself. And, 2.5 turns ago, I would have said Steve Mann was a heavy favorite when he was casting Life from the Loam.
And Joshua's going after Steve's colored mana. He's going after his black sources. You see him exiling an Underground Sea to Lightning Bolt away the Delver. Now, we'd wondered whether Steve was keeping in Delvers. Looks like there, at least on the play, there's some number of them.
Yeah. Now, we talk about Steve Mann and his methodical ways. But he has received a warning for slow play.
If Steve is a really solid technical player, and he's one of the better ones, especially we saw that at the Players' Championship last year. Now, if he has an Achilles heel, that is one of them. Yep. He has gotten a game loss in one of our top 8s in New Jersey, actually, about a year ago for slow play.
His pace is very deliberate, but you have to make plays in a timely fashion. So he has been given a warning. Now, if he gets another warning, that can be upgraded. to a game loss, and this would be one of the worst times to get them. So his pace of play will have to pick up.
Yeah, and it's not, you know, and I've talked to Steve about this too. It's not a manipulation thing where he's controlling the pace for strategy. It's just this is the pace he plays at.
Yeah.
And so for him, it is constantly he has to continue to push himself to play quicker.
Here's a copy of Dig Through Time.
And if you're Steve Mann, this game is starting to feel like the one that got away. You know, you had that turn 3 when he drew the Life from the Loam. We're saying this is the best Life from the Loam I can imagine. Joshua has no lands. We're going to get back 2 fetch lands and a wasteland. Things seemed great. But now we look at it and things are anything but great.
Yeah, things have changed. So we'll see if Dig is going to resolve. Now, Mann does have a copy of Dismember in hand. That was a draw for the turn. So it looks like he wants to cast Dismember. I suppose the question now is, do you want to cast Dismember after Dig Through Time or before? I think you want to cast it after because Joshua is basically looking at his Deathrite Shaman as a mana source, and it's a mana source you can take away.
Yeah, let's screw up that math. Joshua thinks he has 2 lands. Well, we know he has 1.
Yeah.
Wants to make Joshua think he has more mana. Maybe that could cause Joshua to take the wrong card here. Because if you're Joshua Taylor, you would assume that there's no removal for your Deathrite Shaman, because the Deathrite Shaman's been so good here that if Steve had a kill spell, unless it was drawn this turn, it already would have been cast.
2 cards taken, rest going to the bottom. We're going Taylor's way. Picked up a copy of Deathrite Shaman. His mana is very strange right now.
Now we should keep in mind, Joshua is currently losing the life total race.
Very true.
But he has some Lightning Bolts in hand, some Deathrite Shaman in play, another one in hand. I think if push comes to shove and we start racing, Joshua will end up ahead.
There's a Force Will in Taylor's hand along with the blue card too. I'm curious what he's casting. He's going to go with a Pyromancer. Okay.
Well, there's still a Dark Blast in Steve's hand, but Joshua has aggressively gone after Steve's black mana.
And now he's going to just simply pass the turn back.
And it's not just black mana. If Steve draws any land, if at any point he got to start the turn with 2 lands in play, he could dredge this Life from the Loam and just start. He'd be set on lands for the rest of the game.
He's going to come in here with Tarmogoyf. Taylor's going to go down to 6 now. Another thing to note here in this matchup, for Taylor, he's Grixis Delver, which means he's red. For Steve Mann, he's Sultai Delver, which means his splash is green, as they're both blue-black based. Taylor's actually the one that can burn you out.
Right, Steve gets better creatures, but the price he pays is in that department. He doesn't get to play Lightning Bolt.
Yeah, the best that he can do as far as burning you out is concerned is Deathrite Shaman. Here's a Ponder.
And we've seen this before. Joshua is won game 2 by a mana denial, and he has been aggressive at countering Ponders in games where he's been going after Steve's lands.
Volcanic Island off of the Scalding Tarn here for Taylor.
And imagine we'll see it again.
Hey, you don't see Force of Will on Ponder often, but maybe you do now. I can certainly understand a blast effect if Taylor has one in hand.
A blast effect would be great. A Brainstorm would be reasonable.
He's going to start with Brainstorm, trigger the Young Pyromancer. So Elemental Token on the way, and now Brainstorm does resolve. So Taylor's going to draw 3. He'll put 2 back. Perhaps he finds a blue card that he's okay with exiling the Force of Will.
Has drawn another land. Looks like a Daze. Wow, he found a Daze off that Brainstorm. That is perfect.
Perfect for many reasons.
Yeah.
Great with the Pyromancer. Don't have to lose multiple cards.
Get to keep Force plus blue card just in case something goes wrong here. The only way Joshua does not have control of this game is the Tarmogoyf.
Yeah.
If he gets that off the board, he's then ahead completely.
Well, he's got some chump blockers, so might not ever have to get it off the board. I mean, life is easy. Life is easy if it's gone.
Yeah, I mean the problem is that if the Tarmogoyf's still on the board, then he can't actually push damage. Tarmogoyf's a great blocker.
Well, he's pushing some damage right now.
All right.
Now here's a Gurmag Angler.
All right. Well, this is one guy who's bigger than Tarmogoyf.
Yeah. Might actually have the ability to make Tarmogoyf smaller depending on how the graveyards do line up.
So instant sorcery land is all that left. I think Joshua exiled every creature.
But Man has a Delver of Secrets in his graveyard.
He does. So we're still at 4-5.
Yep.
If he wants us to be bigger than Gurmag Angler, he would have to add Planeswalker, Artifact, or Enchantment. He does have Planeswalker in his deck, but no way to make them go away. I mean, if Man wanted to have a line here, and this is not a good one, he could dredge and try to mill a Liliana into the yard.
Yeah.
It would make the Tarmogoyf lethal.
That is very true. It is 3 cards, so you get a decent look at it, but
it's not great.
Yeah, it's not a great shot. Man drew a Ponder for the turn.
Maybe
Looks like he's going to cast Ponder.
Can he get this one to resolve?
He's going to go with Disfigure. Or Dismember.
Right, he has Dismember for the Gurmag Angler. Right, remembering that's way better. That'll put Joshua down to 1.
That's going to resolve.
The unfortunate part is it'll put Steve to 7. He had to pay 4 life for that. Now,
so really, this play is really smart by Josh.
Only 6 damage in play for Josh. So as long as he doesn't have any spell.
Well, Josh has a Bolt in hand. So Josh gets to say, Bolt you, trigger Pyromancer, make a token, block, kill you on the swing back, and that's exactly what he's going to do. So Joshua Taylor is going to win game number 2 here over Steve Mann. Grixis Delver is 1 game away from having a mirror match in the finals of our Season 3 Invitational. And what we thought was a pretty likable and favorable matchup here for Steve Mann, well, he's behind the 8 ball right now. Though, you do have to think about his starts that he's had in these games.
Well, Steve's deck has been executing his game plan. Right there, when he has Wasteland, 2 fetch lands, Life from the Loam, Dark Blast. This is what he wanted to be doing, but Joshua was able to get by it.
Yeah, for Steve, we're unsure how many Delvers he's going to have in on the play after sideboard at all. So we saw one that game. What we haven't seen from Mann yet is a start that involves Deathrite Shaman.
Now, I want to trace back to a line Steve could have taken here, which it's really counterintuitive. If you go back to the turn where he had his great Life from the Loam turn, he wastelanded Joshua off of Volcanic Island, sacrificed 2 fetch lands, and then tried to Life from the Loam all 3 back. If he goes more conservative here and doesn't wasteland, and just keeps the wasteland in play as a mana source, he actually will end up with the 2nd land and eventually get to start Life from the Loaming things. Doesn't mean it does mean he loses the wasteland and just loses free value on getting a wasteland back. It's a really big cost. But I do think if he uses his wastelands as conservatively as that, he might be able to get the Loam engine going that game.
Yeah, that's the turn that changed everything, right? Was the Loam turn? Because the Loam got countered, and then Josh had Wasteland plus Deathrite Shaman, and now all of a sudden the entire game has changed, where it felt like, do I want to kill this land? Maybe yes, maybe no, but I'm going to get to Loam, and if he counters it, I don't care because I get to Loam again, and then Josh...
It seems like free value.
Yeah, Josh has changed everything in one whole turn with Deathrite Shaman plus Wasteland. So, the thing that makes Magic great is I don't really know what he's supposed to do that turn.
Right, so I think it's, you're losing by not Wasteland there, you're losing great value. And it's probable that you can make the play safely, but maybe by just getting lands with your first Loam, it's an insurance policy for yourself. You're saying, I'm losing all these games because Joshua's going at my mana so hard. If I can just shore up the fact that I get, Loaming back 2 more fetch lands is just good in this matchup, even if I don't get a Wasteland. That's my lands number 4 and 5. If I keep making these land drops, I'm going to get to play these great cards in my hand, and that's so valuable that you may just want to have an insurance policy on it.
I get to do multiple things per turn, and that game that we watched, Steve was stuck doing 1 thing per turn.
Yeah, once Steve gets to 4 or 5 lands, I think he's the favorite here.
We haven't seen him get there yet.
No, and Josh was doing a great job of keeping him off lands number 4 and 5.
The one game where we saw Steve win, Josh decided he didn't want to draw any blue lands that game. I suppose it wasn't his decision. Let's say that. It wasn't Joshua's decision to draw no blue lands.
It's true.
We will very quickly talk about the Star City Games newsletter here. It is your source for Magic the Gathering news. You get the latest on the Open Series. You get to watch the SCG Open Series match of the week. We'll certainly have one of those from the Invitationals. We had some really good ones this weekend. Receive exclusive deck list and advice from some of Star City Games columnists. This next month here in September will be Gerard Fabiano filling the hole for that. He did top 8 this weekend. Fantastic weekend for him. Catch up on all the event results and read an exclusive cardboard crack comic. Best of all, you can sign up for free. StarCityGames.com/newsletter for more information about that. Again, your source for Magic the Gathering news, especially what involves on the Open Series. As we do get ready here for game number 4, I got to see it start here with Delver or Deathrite Shaman, at least for me. Preferably Deathrite Shaman. I think it's so important for Assault and Delver to get off those starts. Think about the impact Deathrite Shaman has had for Josh these games. It's been very, very good, even though Josh hasn't often had it on turn number 1. But when it's shown up, it's generated mana, it's had an effect on the game, and I think that Steve's got to find that card.
Well, when you look at the way Steve's losing these games, it's because he's being denied mana sources so heavily by Josh. So yeah, if he can have a turn 1 Deathrite Shaman, especially if he does it off a fetch land, there's so much pressure there. How is Josh going to mana deny that?
He's got to find it. I think it's very, very important that he does, and then we'll see if he's able to.
Yeah. Game 3, Steve will be back on the play.
Game 4.
Game 4, you're absolutely right. Steve will need the remaining 2.
Can't lose again. Gonna take a long look at this opener. Can't take too long a one, though. And it looks like Taylor's going to take a mulligan, so Steve is happy with his opening hand. Mann, again, I think that he is in a relatively favorable matchup. That doesn't mean he can't lose because he's already down 2 games. I think he's got the tools to win, but, you know, we've seen some real shifts in the gameplay. Again, just that loam turn, that I don't know what's right there.
It's really close. I mean, it's so hard to not take the line of maximum value, because if it works, it's so good.
And you don't even care if they counter the spell.
I mean, like I said, we said it when it happened. We said the only reason this counterspell matters is if Joshua has a follow-up Wasteland.
Yeah. You don't even care about Spell Pierce or Daze in that instance. You just, okay, you countered, I cast it again. What do I care? Well, it ended up mattering a lot.
And I think the lesson here, what it seems to me from that, is that on Steve's side, especially if I have a life from the loam or something like that, I just don't want to Wasteland anything. I don't want to be the one using Wastelands offensively from Steve's side of this matchup. The mana sources are just so much better for him.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I really do.
And this is something, if you look at other Sultai decks in Legacy, so Shardless Sultai. You've talked with Jerry Thompson a lot about this. Why does Shardless Sultai only play 2 Wastelands? He says, well, there's a lot of spell-based lands, like Creeping Tar Pits or Grove of the Burn Willows, that I need to kill, but he'll tell you right out that when you play this deck, if you're trying to Wasteland to mana screw your opponent, you're doing it wrong. Shardless Sultai loves its lands. Yeah,
Shardless Sultai, the Wastelands in that deck, they're to kill like Creeping Tar Pits and you know, problematic lands, or, you know, if on the off chance that you are severely mana screwed, maybe I can color screw you a little bit or something like that, then you might see them fire off a Wasteland, but you don't see him just going, oh, turn 1, yeah, Wasteland you.
Yeah. And as Steve becomes more and more of a control deck, granted, he's not a Shardless deck, but the same thing starts to apply here. His lands are there for mana. Joshua's Wastelands are there to blow up things.
Looks like Joshua going to go down to 5 now. Not a great spot to be. Delver decks do mulligan relatively well. That's part of the charm of them when they've got their ponders and their brainstorms. Undoing a mulligan's not particularly difficult. But this just means that, you know, for Mann, his lands are probably a little bit safer now. It's more unlikely that you'll get double wastelanded, or that Joshua will want to double wasteland you.
Yeah.
Things of that nature.
I mean, the 1-for-1 trades when your opponent is down on cards certainly become more reasonable. That said, Steve has lost both these last 2 games with lots of cards in his hand. So as long as Joshua has the right cards to come together to execute another mana denial plan, I don't know how much it will matter that Steve has extra cards. He's still got to be careful.
Well, we'll see if Joshua Taylor can find 5 cards that he does like here. Steve Mann has kept his 7. And Mann cannot lose again. Taylor needs to get one of the 2 games.
So Joshua on 5.
He'll keep it.
All right, can Steve's deck cough up a Deathrite Shaman for him? We've talked about how he hasn't seen one all match.
It's going to cough up a Thoughtseize, which is actually a pretty good start.
Against
someone, someone who's mulling a 5.
Sure, I'll take that.
Gataxian Probe, Young Pyromancer, Daze, Pyroblast, and then a Volcanic Island.
A lot of temptation to take the only threat in the hand, the Young Pyromancer. Once you know about Daze, you can probably play around it.
I'm probably crazy in wanting to take the Probe.
Just want to get him.
Kind of, but...
If you take the Probe and Joshua just draws another land, I think it's the worst card you could have taken.
It's really bad if you take that. Yeah.
But you could get him. You could get him real hard with it.
Also, as we've discussed quite a few times, at least the way that we're viewing the matchup, Steve is the control deck here, so taking the probe doesn't really accomplish very much.
Let them have their cantrips.
Yeah.
Now, if Steve is light on mana sources, maybe he wants to take the days.
Looks like he's going to go Pyroblast.
All right. Now, depending on what else is in his hand, that's pretty reasonable.
Yeah, it could be digging through time, stuff like that. Brainstorming, pondering.
As long as he has more lands, I think he'd be okay trading a Ponder with a Pyroblast. If he is light on lands and is relying on a Ponder to do something, then I definitely think he needs to take that.
Well, we wanted Deathrite Shaman, we got it, along with Dark Blast, and then a couple of lands here, and Tropical Island, Underground Sea, and Misty Rainforest.
So interesting, he did not go for the turn 1 Deathrite. So what that says is this hand could have dealt with any turn 1 play from Joshua that wasn't Deathrite Shaman. So Steve was not okay trading Deathrite Shamans with Joshua. And that's what that Thoughtseize play says.
Thoughtseize the draw here for Mann. Now, Taylor's draw was actually a very good one. It's a copy of Brainstorm.
Also explains why he didn't take Young Pyromancer there. He has a Dark Blast in hand, so absolutely not.
Thoughtseize ya.
He leads on this one rather than Deathrite Shaman. Remember, there's a Daze in Joshua's hand.
And this is Brainstorm. Taylor will draw 3, help to put 2 back. But again, this is what happens. This deck can mulligan to 5. Same thing can be said for Salted Delver, Blue Red Delver, what have you. And still be perfectly fine. They don't need a lot of resources to work with.
Right, and Joshua may hide, and if he can, shuffle away that Young Pyromancer now that he knows that Dark Blast is waiting for it. At the same time, he kind of wants to do the same thing to Daze, now that both his cards are known about, and he'll have to draw one of the 2 next turn. So he can't shuffle them both away.
Ponder, Dismember, Daze, Underground Sea. Kind of funny, almost daring him to take Daze here, but Daze is an answer to Deathrite Shaman, Dismember is an answer to Deathrite Shaman, and then there's the Ponder, and we'll see which one he wants to take here.
Well, and I don't know if Steve's in any rush to make Deathrite Shaman. His hand is very heavy on lands, so rather than taking Daze, I think he'll just try to take the best card and simply make Deathrite Shaman next turn instead. Ponder seems a pretty reasonable take here.
I will say, if he's showing me a Ponder, and I know he put a Young Pyromancer back, what's the mystery card that's in there?
Sure.
Didn't get a great look to find out what it was. Perhaps a Deathrite Shaman? Okay, so
There
that's
we
a mystery
go.
card. Because the next card down is Young Pyromancer. We know that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Mann will draw. Dismembers what he's found.
There is a Daze in Joshua's hand, but Mann's aware of it. Maybe he just goes for something like clean, like Dismember, play your own Deathrite. If he took Dismember, it's because he was trying to clear the way for his own Deathrite Shaman. See if that...
Yeah, I guess we're gonna see Deathrite Shaman first.
Interesting to me is whether or not he wants to spend the Dismember on the Deathrite Shaman or just let Joshua have one. If he spends the Dismember here and Joshua finds a card like Gurmag Angler, it's problematic for Steve.
And there's Dismember. Josh looking at the Daze in his hand, Ponder 2.
You have to think that Daze is not going to ever get a card this game.
No, I would be very... It only gets a card if Steve wants it to.
And as such, if Steve ever allows Daze to counter card, I imagine we'll just see Joshua fire off immediately.
Pyromancer was the draw, but I think Ponder is going to be the play.
Well, playing Pyromancer in this board just doesn't do as much. It's an interesting choice of mana to leave up there. Joshua casts Ponder. Now, Gurmag Angler is in his deck, but I suppose it would only be the 6th card in the graveyard. So that would be enough if he pondered into Angler there, but he picked the wrong land for that play. By leaving up red, it allows him to ponder into Lightning Bolt and answer the Deathrite Shaman. So there's a balancing act in that play.
Yeah. Gonna shuffle with Ponder here. Josh's hand is Daze, Young Pyromancer, and a mystery card coming.
It looks like he found Delver of Secrets.
Can't cast it, though. because he's aware of
Dark Blast.
the Dark Blast, yeah.
And it's hard to overload Dark Blast, even if he gets 3 mana, kind of mentioned before, and tries to play them both. Steve can actually just kill them both on the untap. And Dark Blast twice in the turn.
Dark Blast is great in this matchup. It's funny because Steve has had it in his hand the last 2 games.
And has lost both.
Yeah, he's lost both and hasn't got to do very much with it. But you see what he's doing with it now. This is the intended use of Dark Blast, which is to blank your threats.
Once you're ahead, Dark Blast is very powerful because now it answers Pyromancers and Delvers. When he's behind, when Delvers have already flipped, it becomes a worse card for sure.
Now, Steve's hand not particularly good, and neither is Josh's, really. I mean, Josh actually has action spells, but some of them just aren't castable because of Dark Blast. So Steve's hand is the Dark Blast and then 2 lands. And Josh has cards that die to Dark Blast, Delver and Pyromancer, a Daze, which is horrible right now. And now he's drawing a card for the turn.
The pressure this card is creating just by being in Steve's hand is great right now.
Wasteland was the draw here for Taylor this turn. He'll just pass the turn back.
And one thing you want to note, Steve is main phasing this Deathrite Shaman to take cards out of Joshua's graveyard. And that's a strategy he's using against the Delve spells, like Gurmag Angler and Dig Through Time.
Which is very smart. There goes Pyroblast.
He doesn't want Joshua top decking a Delve spell and being able to cast it. Now, Joshua can still do that right now.
Taylor will draw. Another land, Scalding Tarn. Pass it back. We're going to Mann. Pluto Delta the draw.
And this is the style of game Steve wanted to play. Yeah, he wanted to be the control deck. Sounds great.
You know, he does want to be here. I don't know if he wants it to be this ugly, because it's pretty ugly right now.
Oh, I don't see what's ugly. He has everything answered. Looks beautiful.
He's got Deathrite Shaman just chipping away, I guess.
Got a 12 apiece, 6 more turns, and he'll have it all wrapped up.
We swear these are high-powered decks that do high-powered things, and people can die on turn 1 in this format. I swear they can. Right now, it's looking a little disjointed, but Steve is in the driver's seat even though it doesn't look like it. Taylor going to sacrifice that Scalding Tarn.
It's an aggressive sacrifice. If he draws Brainstorm, he will really want that land back.
Or perhaps a Ponder where he only finds 1 card that he likes.
Yeah, I mean, the value of card selection of having an uncracked fetch land is very high in this format.
All right, Josh, let's take a draw step. See what you find. I think a Deathrite.
Well, Deathrite Shaman's good. It doesn't die to Dark Blast outright. We'll see if Steve wants to 2-for-1 himself to kill it anyway.
I wouldn't be surprised if he does. Truth be told. Upkeep Dark Blast, draw step, dredge it, main phase Dark Blast it again.
All right, he has 2 black mana.
Yeah. I would have some interest, or at least would think it through.
If he does that play, and then Joshua untaps and plays all the other X1s, then Steve has to let one of those guys through.
For the time being.
Yep. Can't make the double Dark Blast play 2 turns in a row. Has to start the turn in your hand for that to work. But if without any other way to kill Deathrite Shaman, I wouldn't be surprised to see him do this.
Yeah, you know, Deathrite Shaman is just annoying enough right now that if I'm Steve, I want it off the table. So on the upkeep.
Here we go.
Yep. He'll cast Dark Blast. Now keep in mind, Taylor does have Copy of Daze in hand, though it doesn't play a huge role. Now Steve had to let go of a Brainstorm, a Delver Secrets, and a Daze.
With the hand Steve has been having, it's only the fitting bad beat that the first time he dredges, the first card off the top is Brainstorm.
Yeah, a little unlucky there.
It's the single best card he could have drawn at this point, from this point. Well, so it goes. He still gets his prize of Deathrite Shaman.
Yeah.
See a little shake of the head from Steve.
There's a land. Here's a Dark Blast. Finish that off. See if Steve wants to go activating in the main phase again. He does. This is going to bring Taylor down to 9. He'll take out the Dismember.
This is the win con right here. Deathrite has done 8 damage so far this game.
It's a card that you can ride to victory in this matchup. As you mentioned, this is the way that Steve wants the games to go. This is exactly it.
He has inevitability.
He's got a lot of stuff covered. And this isn't even nothing to, we haven't even noted that, like, you know, he gets to draw cards every turn too. He could find a Tarmogoyf.
I mean, and that said, I wouldn't be surprised if his draw next turn is Dark Blast. If he dredges it another time.
Okay.
He's ahead. And if Joshua makes another Deathrite, maybe he'll need to make that same play again. And if he wants to do that, Dark Blast will have to be in his hand.
Young Pyromancer number 1.
This is what I mentioned about overloading the Dark Blast.
Yeah. It was a timely Young Pyromancer draw.
But, ooh, he's going to, and this is bad news for Joshua. Steve's going to daze the second Young Pyromancer, and you have to think that the other one's going to get blasted.
Yeah, that's horrible news for Josh. Really, really bad news. Steve probably going to dredge. Yep.
Oh, yeah. No 1/1s on this side.
Wasteland, Disfigure, Scalding Tarn.
And now Joshua has to ask himself really questions you don't want to have to answer, like, do I daze this Dark Blast anyway so that I have a 1/1?
His answer is no. Though that
is
I think,
reasonable.
I think the reason his answer is no to that is just because there's a 1/2 out there in Deathrite Shaman.
Yeah.
I think that's the only reason. It's not a crazy line.
It's not like the daze is getting that much better.
Yeah. I'm sure Steve, when he drew his daze, thought it was going to be horrible. Wouldn't do very much.
Yeah. Well, when you're ahead, daze is one of those cards, even though it gets worse late in the game in general, when you're ahead, your dazes just have more inherent utility because your opponent will always have to act first, so there'll be more windows for you to use your daze.
Josh Taylor with a Ponder. He'll take a look at the top 3. Lightning Bolt among them.
Well, you can get rid of Steve's win con at the very least.
And you can break out of the Deathrite Shaman lock. Still in the Dark Blast lock, though.
Well, he does have 2 copies of Gurmag Angler, and those guys do not get Dark Blasted easily.
Taylor taking a long look at the Ponder. No guarantee he'll keep it, of course. Could just take a mystery card. We'll see if that's what he wants to do.
And for all the control style things Steve has been doing, he has not stumbled across a real finisher. He has not drawn a Tarmogoyf or a True Name Nemesis or a Dig Through Time here. Those are the cards that would really close it out for him. So it is possible. I mean, if you look at Steve's hand, it's definitely possible for Joshua to claw back in.
Yeah, get a good look, Josh. Just a couple of lands, nothing going on
You're
there.
actually just losing to Deathrite Shaman. It doesn't have a supporting cast.
There's a Bolt.
All right, now it's just Dark Blast. And sure, Steve can answer Joshua's X1s, but Steve's on top deck mode.
Well, Steve's got a lot of good top decks.
And I like, if you want to talk about how careful Steve has been, he's keeping exactly 2 lands in hand, and that's a nod to Brainstorm.
Wasteland going to go after the Trop. Man will draw a card.
Is it a land?
I think so.
Ugh.
Taylor might be calling himself back into this one.
I mean, in some ways he's climbing back in, and in some ways Steve just isn't shutting the door.
Deck hasn't cooperated with him.
Not at all.
Well, maybe it was more than a land.
Oh, it might have been way more than a land.
That's a
Hold on.
Okay. That's a little bit
That
better.
may have been, that and Brainstorm were the best cards he could have drawn there.
Yeah. That's a lot better than a land.
And if this one's going to resolve and should be enough to get him across the finish line.
Yeah, you think he'd be able to find the resources he's looking for. It'd have to be a pretty bad dig through time for him to not be able to pull forward here. He's already been ahead the whole time. Life totals are in his favor. Board is in his favor, it appears. Hands are about as bad for each player. But dig is here. And I think this is exactly what the doctor ordered. So Steve will take a look at the top 7, take 2 with him. Thoughts he's among those cards.
So he's looking for Tarmogoyfs, Brainstorms, True Name Nemesis if it's in the deck, Abrupt Decay, Dismember.
A lot of good choices here for him. I'd be fine with another copy of Deathrite Shaman. Jeez.
Get that clock running again.
Yeah. It was so problematic for him the first time. Looks like he's found 2 cards he's happy with. Now it's time to deploy Deathrite. Has the mana to play around days. I'll pass the turn back.
All right. T-4 back online.
It's just a slight delay, but it's back now. Taylor still has some of the rubbish in his hand.
It's the Deathrite Shaman plus Dark Blast plus nothing else lock.
Well, I was going to say he had rubbish in his hand, but now he's actually got a good card here in Gurmag Angler.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons we were saying the cards that Steve's looking for, Dismember's among them. It's Steve's cleanest answer to Gurmag Angler. Despite the fact that Joshua only pays 1 mana for it, certainly can't Abrupt Decay the 5/5.
I like playing Delver here a lot.
Right, so this forces Steve to dredge Dark Blast if he wants to get rid of the Delver. If he doesn't have Dismember and he dredges Dark Blast, well then he's not going to get a Dismember.
Well, Steve doesn't ever move this fast, so he must have something going on that he likes. Because he didn't even consider dredging Dark Blast. He very quickly played his Delver of Secrets, so I'm curious as to what's going on now.
Well, if he can get the top card of his deck to be an instant, this Delver is very powerful. Deathrite is 2 on the end step. Untap 2 more Delver flies for 3. That's actually lethal.
Steve considering removing something on the main phase again. We've seen him continue to do this to try to play around the Delve spells to the best of his ability. That's just further proof that the Graveyard spell is so fast in Legacy. That's why the Delve spells are so busted.
He's had enough life that he can remove Ponder instead of Lightning Bolt. 3 from the Delver, 5 from the Angler, and 3 from Bolt is only 11. Steve's at 12.
Josh checking with Delver. It's a miss. Will Gurmag Angler consider getting in the red zone? I think it will, because not going to win by doing nothing.
If Steve's Delver flips, I believe Joshua's dead.
I think so.
The big check.
Man going to check it out.
No. Does he want to crack the fetch land? Is that what he's tanking on now?
Yeah, I wonder what the card is.
Even so, he's still in a great situation. Yeah, he's just going to dredge.
Yep.
He's in a great situation in that... Oh, wow. Dark Blast actually should do it.
Dark Blast looks like it does get the job done here. I'm not sure
Here's
if...
1 from the Delver.
Put him down to 4. Yeah, and if he goes down to 4...
Cheeky right there. 2 black mana up for Steve. Yep. 2 instants in graveyards. Yeah, this should work just fine.
Take care of your Lightning Bolt. Take care of your days. My own days, excuse me. And that will get it done. So Steve Mann's going to tie things up here against Joshua Taylor. Getting ready for game number 5 between Sultai Delver and Grixis Delver. Now, I think that's a little bit more how he wants the games to go.
That was, I mean, how many turns did we play there? It was at least...
A lot.
A lot. You know, and that's the answer Steve wants.
Yeah, if we ask him how many turns did you play, he wants to answer the question with a lot.
How many cards are in the deck?
Yeah. And, you know, that's... As we saw that game, look how much different the game is when he has Deathrite Shaman versus when he doesn't.
Right, well, it's... I mean, all Deathrite really did that game was it just a damage. You know, I suppose Mana denied out Josh off some Delve spells, or at least that was the intention, but it didn't really even do that. Early game, I think Deathrite's very important for Steve, and this is why Deathrite is great, is that it's a mana creature that is great in the early game, that is still functional in the late game, and we saw that second half on display there.
You see the sideboards here yet again for both players. We'll run them down again one more time as we get ready for our last game here of this semifinal match. Taylor will be on the play with his Pit the Needle, Static Caster, Dread of Night, Ancient Grudge, Dismember, Flusterstorm. Vendilion Click of Thoughtseize. Those are all singletons to go along with 2 Cabal Therapies, 2 Surgical Extractions, 3 Pyroblast. One last time for you. Anything change here? Anything that you really like?
On Steve's side, that was the pace of the game that I would want to see. Now, it doesn't look like Steve has gone toward True Name Nemesis in the post-board games. Opting more for a even harder control deck. And that much seems fine. He's still, you know, he's boarded in Thoughtseize, Loam, Dark Blast. He's just becoming more of a control deck. So then we need to look at what are interactions that Joshua can do against that kind of strategy. Vendilion Click seems pretty good. Yes, it's still kept in check by Dark Blast, but it actually gets rid of the dredge spells, which seems really important here.
I mean, I like flying in the matchup a pretty healthy amount. As you mentioned, it does die to Dark Blast, which is not great, and Steve has drawn that a couple times. And we saw the role that it has had in the matchup, taking care of Pyromancer and Delver before it flips. Josh doesn't have a lot of great options, and I don't think he wants to board in discard spells. I don't love Cabal Therapy and Thoughtseize in this matchup.
Well, the pressure Steve had there was out of his graveyard, not out of his hand.
Yeah.
You know, his hand was for how many turns was the board? Steve had a Deathrite in play, a bunch of lands in his hand, and a Dark Blast in the graveyard. Discard wouldn't do anything there.
Other side of things here for Steve, man. He's got that Grafdigger's Cage, Pit the Needle, Notion Thief, True Name Nemesis, Dark Blast, Dread of Night, Kogari Charm, Vanillion Click, Life in the Loam. Those are the singletons, along with 2 Surgical Extractions, 2 Thoughtseize, 2 Flusterstorm. And Steve's got a lot of options too. You know, we know that Dark Blast is in the deck. It's unclear if True Name Nemesis is in the deck. I would be surprised if Kogari Charm's not in the deck. It seems like it's pretty good here, the -1/-1 effect.
Yeah, I mean, so Golgari Charm is decent at dealing with X1s. If a young Pyromancer ever gets out of control, which hopefully it won't, but if it does, Steve will very much like to have a Golgari Charm.
Good to have an out there to that. And then we know Life in the Loam's in.
Exactly.
Yeah, because if he can get that online, Life is pretty good. He got close to doing it game number 3. We'll see if he can do it here for game number 5.
Yeah, it doesn't help him with removal or winning the game, but it certainly knocks Joshua's LD package out of the park. And on top of that, it allows Steve to wasteland Josh out of the game. We never got to that in the Life in the Loam game, but it's definitely an end game Steve can pursue.
You see how both these players got here with their records. 6-2 in Legacy for Steve Mann with Sultai Delver, 6-1-1 in Standard with Green-Red Devotion. In Legacy for Josh, 7-0-1 with Grixis Delver. You can make it 8-0-1 since he beat Gerard Fabiano. And then in Standard, 5-3 with Mono Red. Got just enough wins with the aggressive archetype. Both these players' first invitational top 8. For Mann, the more accomplished of the two with 10 Open Series top 8s, and he won the Open Series Legacy Open in Atlanta 2014. Also has that top 8 at Pro Tour Gate Crash. For Taylor, a more modest resume with a 40th place finish at Pro Tour Journey to Nix. But whoever does win this game goes on to the finals of the Invitational and could be our Invitational champion, which means they'd be winning $10,000 and going to the Players' Championship.
And we have to remember just how good Grixis Delver has been this weekend, even though it struggled a bit in this matchup. 7-0-1, Joshua Taylor into the top 8. I mean, we look at their other finals. We have Alex Pastecki. He's now 9-1 on the weekend with Grixis Delver. Between the two of them, they are 17 wins, 1 loss, and 1 draw. This deck has just been dominant this weekend.
This is, again, it's hard for me to say if there's a best Delver deck because Delver is such a good deck, and you know, you can make arguments for playing any of them. I know we didn't see like any Teamer Delver this weekend. I didn't expect to see Blue-Red Delver put up the performance it had, but it feels like right now in Legacy, Grixis Delver is where you want to be.
Yeah, well, I mean, remember, Grixis is going a decent amount down the Blue-Red path as well. What I think we have going on right now is when you look at your Delver strategies, you need to look at what the other popular decks are in the format. And the main fair decks, or even unfair decks that are being played, are Omnitel and Miracles. And if those are the decks you're trying to beat, Grixis Delver's a great choice.
Especially against Omnitel when you have access to Cabal Therapy and all that discard.
It's excellent, yeah.
Definitely a spot you want to be in. We're underway here in game number 5 of the semifinals. Winner of this match, moving on to the finals.
All right. Shout out again. Remember, in these last games, Joshua has gone hard at Steve's mana. Every time he has won. But when Steve has gotten to make his land drops and play his cards, it has been Mann.
Underground C is where Steve will start off the Flooded Strand. That's why he's at 19. We'll see what the follow-up will be. Looks like he does have a copy of Thoughtseize.
Yeah, and remember that last time. Steve valued a turn 1 Thoughtseize over a turn 1 Deathrite Shaman. It's really a control deck here.
Taylor will sacrifice Misty Rainforest. It's all tied up at 19. We'll see what land he wants to go grab.
Either he's going for a counterspell or he's going to brainstorm to hide his good stuff.
Oh, so you don't think he's just going to throw a lightning bolt at him?
Just unlikely.
Let it rip.
How many more lightning bolts are in his hand? Thoughtseize is going to deal 2.
There you go.
Steve's helping.
Does he have that brainstorm? Does he have that counterspell? Would now even be a good time to daze.
Daze might be seen as a win for Steve. At least that in that situation, you got Josh to pick up his land. I think Josh was debating between Spell Pierce and Daze there, and decided eventually that his own land is worth enough that he wants to Pierce.
So I think we're going to have a fight here on the first turn of the game.
Some Dazes are going to show up?
I think so. Maybe not. Maybe Steve is posturing.
I think if you're Steve, you're okay with that fight. Both players trading cards is probably good for the Sultai deck.
Yeah, I think so. Sultai loves to trade and then gas back up. There's Underground Sea. Deathrite Shaman.
That posturing from Steve may have been the tip-off. You see Joshua did not play Deathrite turn 1. He wanted it to turn 1 there. He wanted to have the counter spell up on turn 1 and then be able to play a Daze-proof Deathrite. Will Steve Force of Will? Wow. He's contemplating it.
And he's going to let it go. There's a lot to think about, though. Dark Blast the draw.
Well, that card has shown up all 4 sideboard games.
Yeah, it has.
It has been a big player.
Now remember, Deathrite Shaman not the end of the world here for Mann. He does have cards like Abrupt Decay, Disfigure, Dismember. Even though we haven't really seen Abrupt Decay show up at all. Here's Ponder.
You know, that is true. For a card that he plays 2 of in his deck, we haven't seen a lot of Abrupt Decay, and it's excellent in the matchup.
Yeah. Ponder's resolving. So, Mann will take a look at the top 3. He'll decide if he wants to keep them or shuffle them and take a mystery card.
The one thing that Deathrite will do is it will keep Dark Blast in check until Steve kills the Deathrite. I think Steve needs to be very careful to not ever let the Dark Blast get exiled by a Deathrite Shaman.
Yeah, I don't think that's something that he'll have happen. It seems very unlikely. It would take I think, a pretty large misstep on his end. There can be a chain of events, I suppose, where that does occur, but it seems unlikely. He is staring at a Dismember right now, and he's just going to pass the turn back. I think he's basically saying you could have a turn with Deathrite Shaman, maybe more.
See how he uses it? Damage, mana, all possibilities. Pyroblast, Lightning Bolt, Wasteland, all in Joshua's hand. And now this is that mana denial that has served Joshua so well.
He's been all about mana advantages.
Every time he's done it, he's won.
Yeah. Active Death right here for Taylor.
Looks like he'll just pass. No desire. Yeah, he can just use Deathrite on end step. His hand is very reactive.
I think this is a matchup where Josh wants to have a more proactive hand than reactive, because he does have a Brainstorm over there. He's at the Pyroblast that you mentioned.
I mean, this sit on Deathrite, do nothing. That was Steve's strategy game 4. I don't know that it will work as well from the Grixis side.
I think Steve's a lot better at it than Josh is.
Yeah, I mean, he has the dredge cards. He has his removal is less conditional. His finishers are much better.
Here's Deathrite. Gonna take care of a Ponder. Main phase action there because of the same reason that we saw Steve doing it last game.
Both players are playing Delve cards.
Yeah.
The cards we talked about in this matchup from Steve, the Tarmogoyfs and the Abrupt Decays, the things we felt were trumps, have just been absent this match.
Looks like Steve does not have a second land.
Oh my, this is an encore of what Steve has really been struggling with.
Dismember.
Remember, unlike card like Thoughtseize, Steve will lose the 4 life regardless of whether this resolves.
So he's down at 12. Taylor at 19. We have a Brainstorm here, perhaps?
We do. I feel like doesn't he already have the Daze in hand?
So he was posturing as though he had a Daze. I do not believe he has a Daze.
Okay, well played, Joshua Taylor.
Now Brainstorm's going to resolve.
Yeah, maybe he'll find one.
Yeah. He has acted like he's had a Daze in his hand on that opening salvo for Thoughtseize and then Spell Pierce. Steve was acting like he had one too.
And neither of them do.
I wouldn't be surprised if they're both bluffing.
I mean, if you're Steve, you don't even want to play a Daze if you had it. Picking up your land here is very expensive. All right. Brainstorm resolves. Dismember still on the stack. Did Joshua find the Daze? Did he find the Force? And if he did, is he willing to do it? All right.
All right.
Removal works. That was on Joshua's end step.
Yep. Here's Ponder.
Can Steve find a fetch land, find some way out of this mana hole? If he can only cast those cards, he should be fine. He's kept the board clear of creatures. It's gone to 12, which is not dangerously low, but it's not healthy.
Looks low.
If he's keeping him on top, there's a land in there.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I thought he might be shuffling.
So he's hand 2 Brainstorms, a Dark Blast, a Tarmogoyf.
His hand's good if he has lands, but we've said that every game.
Yeah, I mean, when he's had lands, he's won.
Yeah.
It's a good matchup. Well, I guess once the cards start interacting, it's a good matchup, but he has to play his cards.
Yeah. Taylor will take a draw.
Back to Taylor. So, just Taylor's hand, and we said this before, it suffered from being very reactionary. So despite the fact that he was ahead on tempo, ahead on mana, he didn't do much with it. And now that Steve's resolving cantrips, those advantages are going to go away. And then there's be Joshua's cards versus Steve's cards. And Joshua can win that fight, but he's not favored in it.
There's Brainstorm.
I don't know how much Steve wants to fight over these things. He may just be content, letting Josh cantrip, just throwing cards, having these 1-for-1 cards go after each other.
You know, it's never enjoyable to let Brainstorm resolve.
Right, and especially because Joshua's hand's been weak these last few turns. He hasn't used his mana. He's casting Brainstorm. He has a fetch land up. This Brainstorm's really good.
I think I want to play in a Magic tournament, a Legacy tournament, where I just counter every Brainstorm my opponent casts and see what happens.
Just all of them.
I want to see what happens. Or just aggressively Force of Will it and Spell Pierce them and Daze them and everything.
Do I get to know ahead of time that you're doing that?
No, of course not.
Okay.
I'm just gonna go to one local Legacy event with some Delver deck, and I'm just going to aggressively counter my opponent's Brainstorms and see, does that mess with their deck?
Sure.
Because I feel like every time someone casts a Brainstorm, the other person's like, kind of want to counter this.
Every time someone has a greedy keep because of Brainstorm, you're going to punish them.
I do get paid off. Brainstorm will fix it. We oftentimes call it the best card in Legacy, and it is.
Oh, and it is.
But it never gets countered.
It's countered sometimes, but you're right. Well, it's not easy to counter. It only costs 1.
I know.
You have to hard counter it. There aren't that many. Force of Will is the only card that does that. Counter spell.
There are not many.
Yeah.
Mann will sacrifice blue to Delta. Behind on life, but both players really posturing for position right now.
You could just red blast all of them. That would be good enough.
Yeah, I have to play red.
Right. Well, there's a downside.
Yeah. Here's Tarmogoyf. A lot of upside to this card, especially in this matchup.
This guy has been so absent this match, but it is Steve's best card here because of Joshua's inability to deal with it once it's on the board.
It's so big.
What do we have? Instant, land, creature, sorcery, 4/5.
It's in. Taylor will sacrifice.
With Tarmogoyf on the board, this means that Joshua is unlikely to get board control back. So his eyes are going to have to shift over to Steve's life total. 11's a big number, though. It's not impossible to interact with. Cards like Flipped Delvers, Lightning Bolts, Deathrite Shamans, those might be able to do the trick. But he's got a race. If he can somehow remove the Tarmogoyf, it'll probably cost him 2 cards to do so. And even then, he may just not have a line that does that.
Taylor will draw a card for the turn. He's staring down a 4/5, so now he's got to figure out he's going to move forward because we're into the mid-game now, even though the mid-game in Legacy is 3 lands, 2. Both players with a lot of cards in hand, a lot of options, a lot of posturing taking place. But now Mann can actually start to get on the offensive. Do something real here. Here's the Thoughtseize to open things up. Mann very quickly going to let that resolve.
Yeah, now Josh will see the difficulties that lie ahead. Brainstorm, Force of Will, Dark Blast, and second Tarmogoyf.
Yeah. Tough tough hand to poke a hole through.
Well, he might have to just take second Tarmogoyf because I don't know that he can beat 1, but he certainly can't beat 2. That said, you know, it's a hand with 2 brainstorms. So when you have brainstorms, your cards cantrip so nicely, and they'll turn into whatever you want them to be. That now just card quantity is what matters.
Yeah, really. You know, you see 2 brainstorms over there, and that's not.
They're anything.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not really indicative of anything. You have 2 cards that can become anything to mess with you. There's a Misty. Interesting.
Oh, the things you do to kill Tarmogoyfs. There we go. 2 lightning bolts. I mean, he just saw Force plus blue card in Steve's hand. That's the most painful part.
So I think Josh is left with 1 card in hand after this exchange. If I'm Steve,
if it's days, just
well, if I'm Steve, I'm just like, that's fine. If you're going to use 2 cards to kill my Tarmogoyf, my hand is stack loaded.
I mean, Joshua is loudly proclaiming that either his last card is days or he's making a desperation play here. It's painful to lose that Tarmogoyf. All right, he'll play into it. Is it days? If it's not,
like, it could be like another lightning bolt or a spell pierce or something. I think this is Josh's last card in his hand.
Yeah, it is.
He has used his spell pierce already this game.
Right, so he doesn't have another one of those. It could be a red blast.
Yeah, all right,
it
power
is.
blast. Okay, you know.
And that's going to hurt. That Steve went for the force of will there is going to hurt.
But if you're Steve,
it was worth it.
Your opponent's out of cards. You have 2 brainstorms in your hand.
Well, just 1 now.
Oh, just 1, excuse me. Dark Blast, Brainstorm, Ponder.
It's pretty good. You probably win from this board.
I think that you are definitely advantaged, and you move forward accordingly. Going to start with a Ponder. I go Golgari Charm and Abrupt Decay, and I think that top card is Dig Through Time. The middle card is Dig Through Time, yes.
Well, Dig Through Time is perfect here.
Yeah. And that's actually part of the reason that I like that Steve kind of fought back, is because if he cares about finding Dig Through Time, you want to get whatever that counter spell is out of Joshua's hand, be it Daze, be it Pyroblast, so that your dig can resolve. So that play makes sense to me.
I mean, if your game plans to be a control deck and to trade, yes, it's a 2-for-1, but it's your opponent's last card. So sure, leaving your opponent at 0 is great.
It's a Ponder here for Josh Taylor. Almost 100 minutes into this match, but we knew it would be a pretty long one.
Going to the full 5. Steve Mann took game 1. Joshua kept a hand heavy on Wastelands and Gitaxian Probes, but when he failed to find a blue mana, it eventually went Steve's way. Joshua rallied back with 2 games of aggressively attacking Steve's mana. It brought him to a 2-1 lead. Game 4, Steve fights back. Dark Blast locks out a lot of Joshua's plays, and eventually a Deathrite Shaman goes the distance. And that brings us to game 5.
See a shuffle here with the Ponder for Josh Taylor.
Steve has that Dark Blast lock set up again. Joshua knows about it too, and that will cut off most of his outs. Though as of right now, Steve is still weak to Gurmag Angler.
Mann is considering untopping. Okay.
Yeah.
Again, Taylor just drew a mystery card, so it's completely unclear if the card that he drew was good or bad or what have you.
Well, it's going to have to be good. Here's that Dig Through Time that Steve pondered into.
Yeah, and Steve is saying, I dare you to draw a good card.
If this resolves, I don't see Joshua winning anymore.
Neither do I.
Joshua let Steve pick out the 6 Delft cards. See Steve trying to keep a nice diversity in the graveyard for Tarmogoyf.
Yeah, those are the 6 that are going to go. Those are the 5 that are going to stay.
Creature, sorcery, instant, land.
Yep. And now Dig's going to resolve. So.
Oh my.
S-Man will look at the top 7, get to take 2 home with him. It's a good spot to be.
He's got a lot of answers in his hand. He doesn't have a threat yet. But here's Deathrite Shaman. That can win the game. It's done it once already. Just pulling ahead on cards. He has Dark Blast in hand. He has Brainstorm in hand.
Well, we felt that this is how the games would oftentimes go,
Exactly.
which is trade, 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 trade resources, Steve casts Dig, or they trade a bunch of resources, and then Josh has to make unfavorable trades to try to get Steve's stuff off the board, like a double lightning bolting a Tarmogoyf.
Yeah, and eventually Steve finds a win con, whether it's a Deathrite Shaman or really a Life from the Loam would be great. Once it let him make his way to a Wasteland, start going after Josh's mana, he'll find some way to break parity.
And that's been the plan all along here for Steve. Now, he's had some mana issues, and I think that Josh's plan of attacking his mana aggressively has worked, but it was also smart. Because Josh does not want to go late. You have to pick a role, who's the beatdown, as they say. And I think in this matchup, Josh Taylor is. There's Deathrite Shaman.
Go back, and Steve with plenty of ways to kill Deathrite Shaman, so he draws a fetch land there. Has a Deathrite of his own. He's still behind on life points.
And doesn't have a ton of lands, but he did pick up a copy of Scalding Tarn.
Right, he can decay and play Deathrite here.
I like leading out with Deathrite because Decay, of course, is uncounterable. So if you're worried about a counterspell, which I don't think he needs to be, because I think the card in Josh's hand is not particularly good.
If there was a counterspell, it probably would have countered Dig.
Yeah. But I still think the sequencing is correct right now.
Yeah, let's play the uncounterable in 1 second. Now Steve continues that raw resource trade. It's going to be the first Abrupt Decay we've seen cast all match.
Yeah.
But the card's excellent here.
Deathrite Shaman's got to go. Heading back Josh Taylor's way.
And for Joshua Taylor, the last out seems to be Gurmag Angler.
Yeah.
If he can find one and cast it, Steve doesn't have an answer to one yet. But everything else, these X ones, the LD plan, they're all looking really bad.
Kill a land, feel free. Deathrite Shaman's here to provide any color of mana, and now Steve has drawn a Wasteland, and I spy an Underground Sea.
Yeah, if Gurmag Angler is the last card to be worried about, there's only one black mana in play. Seems too easy for Steve to just make waste back. And what I like about it, we were talking about the Wastelands in Steve's deck, it's not that he's trying to completely early game shut Josh out. He's using it as a control card. He's cutting off outs here.
Deathrite Shaman's going to go to work on the graveyard. Pass that turn back. Again, some of Taylor's draws are going to be bottlenecked a little bit here, again, because Steve does have a little less mana for his Dark Blast.
Steve's still got to be careful. Remember, every time he uses those Wastelands offensively, it comes back to get him.
Daze the draw.
He's down to one land again. I think he's fine this time, but that last Wasteland was uncomfortably close.
Now, one thing to note, Steve, 2 Underground Seas in the graveyard, 1 on the battlefield.
That's all of them.
That's the last one.
He does have Life from the Loam in the deck, so they could come back. But it's not in his hand.
Deathrite just removed something, pass the turn back. Not casting Brainstorm yet.
Last cards from Joshua. It's a replacement Black Source and Deathrite Shaman. Had to play out the land. Can't actually cast Deathrite off Volcanics.
Golgari Charm. Not particularly useful.
No, not really. Steve does, despite having 5 cards in hand, he has a lot of dead cards. He's got Dark Blast, Golgari Charm, Daze. And remember, this interaction between Deathrite Shamans creates a staring match in a lot of ways. When no one wants to go to exile any cards when the other one's untapped, because you can target the same card in response, and then only one player gets the ability. So because we have dueling Deathrite Shamans, the fact that Steve is at lower life is not irrelevant.
Yep. He cast a Brainstorm, but I don't think he found a land in the Brainstorm, so this could be really bad news.
Once again, is it going to come back to hit Steve that he wastelanded again? Just, with that second mana. Oh, I don't know.
He does have Deathrite for mana, so he's doing okay.
Well, for now, remember, Joshua can deny that starting next turn.
All right, well, there's a Dismember, so that's going to take care of the Deathrite Shaman. Steve is back in a comfortable spot, though. He had to take 4 to cast that.
Down to 5. Now lightning bolts are a thing.
Oh,
now they're a big thing. Joshua
Yeah.
goes for Dig Through Time.
Force of Will is going to stop it.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
But Steve at 4. I mean, if you're in Steve Mann's position, it's not unreasonable to just start exiling some creatures. Like
If he had
if
green,
you had
green mana. We know he's not. We know he's not drawing green. We know he's not drawing green either. It's getting tight. it's getting a little tight.
This Joshua can mana deny from any point in the game.
We know the next card is a miss. It's a daze.
All right. Well, 6 turns of Deathrite. That's
a
what
lot.
Steve has.
That's a lot of those.
Please don't draw cantrips into burn. Don't burn me. You know. Oh. All right.
Well, dig through time's gonna go. What is this another? Oh, no way.
We can't cast it.
Dismember. Okay.
Takes 2. And now Steve has nothing.
Good draw there from Taylor. This is a Training Nemesis that Steve's going to draw. Could not be further away. He's down to 1 mana. Taylor.
Remember, he still has a Dark Blast he can cast with that, so there aren't that many finishers that Taylor can actually draw from here.
Tropiquai on the draw. Big one.
Yeah, but this Wasteland play comes back to hurt him, because if he had the Wasteland in play, he could just cast True Name.
Yep.
And oh my gosh.
I thought it was Angler. But it's just Deathrite Shaman.
And there's only single black for Steve, so he can't even make the play of double Dark Blasting it. He's at 4 without a kill spell for this Deathrite Shaman. True Name Nemesis doesn't interact. Dark Blast doesn't interact. Golgari Charm doesn't interact. This is a huge threat.
And so now this just got really hard because his other 2 black producing lands are in the graveyard. So now he's got to find a card like Loam. True Name Nemesis is too slow. You know, Abrupt Decay is an answer to the problem. Let's see what he draws. It's a Wasteland.
All right, we can cast True Name. It's a turn later than he wants it to be, though. Now, what he can do is he can cast True Name. He can Wasteland Joshua off all of his black mana, and Joshua won't be able to deal the final point.
True.
For now.
True.
There still are, fetch lands to get a black mana source, and Lightning Bolts. I think Steve is counting Underground Seas right now.
That's a good thing to do.
There's 1 in the bin. Was there 2 or just 1? We don't know. But his line is spelled out for him. He's going to have to True Name here.
Yeah, if you take a look at the cards in Steve's hand, you can really kind of check them off the list, right? Daze, nothing. G-Charm, nothing. Dark Blast, nothing right now.
So, I mean, you can, if you True Name and then Wasteland, you'll be at 2.
Yep.
If you Wasteland first, then Joshua will start hitting you with the 1/2. You'll be at 3. I don't see a functional difference between 2 and 3 here, because Lightning Bolt is, well, good game both ways.
It's good game either way.
So I think you lead on True Name in case you draw something you want to cast next turn.
He's going to go Wastelanding? I think you got to cast True Name. Yeah, I think you have to.
Here it is.
Answer?
Well, Steve has a Daze. So, well, that probably just doesn't work. Daze isn't relevant. Counts on. Let's check to see if we can. There's no Underground Sea in that exile pile. Looks like there's 1 in that graveyard. So that means even if Steve wastes Joshua off the Underground Sea, that any fetch land drawn by Joshua will get to the 3rd copy of it.
So now things are, you ready for some fun?
Okay.
So these players are going to take a look at each other's graveyards, all that jazz. So Steve does have a way out of this, and it's real strange, but he does have a way out of this.
All right.
So with Dark Blast, depending on how he times it, he can Dark Blast, or he can do this with, Golgari Charm, but he can Dark Blast, Daze it.
Oh wow.
With alternate casting cost to pick up his Underground Sea, pay with the
Replay,
Wasteland, replay,
and kill it.
Now, I don't know if he sees that, and that's pretty hard to figure out if you've ever done it before. Thankfully, I'm friends with known lunatic Greg Hatch, who loves dazing his own spells for value.
For mana fixing. I mean,
correct.
There's very little value in Daze at this point anyway.
But if you've never made that play before, you don't know it. It's like when you Cryptic Command to bounce your own land to activate Mutavault and finish them.
Yeah.
Like the first time you see it, you're like, oh my god, and then you're looking for excuses to do it because you're trying to get too fancy. But this is a situation, and there's a Wasteland that's going to go after the black source where he can, and he doesn't need the, so with the Dark Blast one,
He doesn't need, yes, he
doesn't
can do
need
it
the
now.
Wasteland. Yeah, he can do it now, but he can only do it in his upkeep because he has to dredge it back and draw it.
Yep, it's that double Dark Blast play we talked about.
So had he made
Is
that
he
move,
attacking?
yeah, well, he killed the Black Source. He's attacking, going to put him down to 4.
Well, then he'll go to 1. I mean, he doesn't actually win that race. Well, he does. He can just Dark Blast,
Dark Blast it,
to
yeah.
Fog.
Yep.
Okay.
This could be a simple lightning. Oh, Ponder is never good to see.
Oh boy. Oh boy. All right, so his plan right now is to hit with True Name Nemesis and then each turn cast Dark Blast to not take damage off Deathrite. But if Joshua finds a fetch land or a lightning bolt, that might be good game.
Yeah, Black Source.
Yeah, I believe there's 1 C left, so a fetch land should get him a Black Source.
This is the scariest Ponder ever if you're Steve Mann.
If you're Joshua, I don't think you have it. Yeah, he's shuffling.
All right. Step 1 here for Steve.
Crisis number 1 averted.
Yeah.
But, oh boy.
Yeah, that's
oh boy.
That look says it all.
Just. All right.
Can't even bear to
Can't
look.
do it.
I would not be able to look.
It's a Delver?
That just dies.
No. Because if we're using Dark Blast to fog Deathrite Shaman, no, it doesn't just die.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'd be okay going to 1.
Right, but then you can't attack with True Name because you can't Dark Blast everything unless you do the Daze thing.
Well, no, so here's what happens, right? If
he Abrupt Decays?
No, so if Josh attacks right now.
Okay.
Okay, so you go to 1, right?
Right. We go Golgari Charm.
No, you just go to 1 because Golgari Charm will kill your True Name Nemesis. So you just go to 1, and then he plays Delver post-combat. You kill it with Dark Blast.
Then you dredge.
And then you dredge it, and then you can lock this down. So now if he Dark Blast ahead of time like this, he stays at 2.
Okay.
Okay, and then Josh plays his Delver, you dredge, shoot his Delver, and then
we're okay for now. But you still take 1, but you're ahead in the race.
Well, we're steady at 2 right now, so we haven't taken any damage, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a Trop.
If there was a Delver there, yeah, I mean, you then next turn you could only blast 1 of them. You take 1, but not 2.
So he's okay, and the best part of this for Steve is best is not the best word to use right now, but you want to attack with Tree Nemesis and put him to 1 because that colds his fetch lands. So that colds him peeling that colds like a lot of his Black Source from killing you. So
then he has to just draw. Then it's lightning. Then we're down to lightning.
Lightning bolt and like the natural draw of Underground Sea and stuff like that. So he has to attack. Additionally, now he's knocked him down to 1, so Deathrite gaining life, putting him up to 3 doesn't matter because he still dies.
Mm-hmm.
Now Steve should not crack that fetch land. Should just say go. So he's going to do that.
Big draw. Big draw. All right.
A little slow roll here for Josh Taylor.
Did he get there?
Not as slow as Gerard. He's got to learn a little bit better from his friend.
Lightning bolt, Underground Sea, any cantrip. Those are the things he needs.
He's looking through the graveyard.
Dig through time. That'd be great.
That'd be fantastic. But we don't got a great look at the hand. We believe, that there's a Delver of Secrets over there.
That expression says it all. I don't think he has it.
Mm-hmm.
Down to the wire, game 5.
He can get him to 1 via the attack step. Now he's searching for answers. Going through both players' graveyards. Where did I miss a point? How is there nothing I can do?
Yeah, doesn't have the black mana.
Has to pass. Mann will draw. I think this is going to be the fastest attack we've ever seen Steve Mann make as an entire life, and that is going to do it. Steve Mann is going to win this match here over Joshua Taylor, 3-2. Taylor comes up 1 point short, and for Mann and his Sultai Delver deck, he moves on to the finals to battle against Grixis Delver once again. What a match.
Wow, so the comeback from Steve completes it, going games 4 and 5 to take victories, and in a nail biter, stays at 2 life to defeat Joshua Taylor.
Back and forth they went. Steve had mana issues in most of the games, but Joshua caused them via Wasteland. I think Josh aggressively going after Steve's mana base was very, very smart. Steve doesn't have a ton of lands in his deck. I think Josh gave himself every opportunity to win that match. You see a gentleman shake there, and deservedly so. Those guys played their hearts out. But Steve Mann does win this match. He's going to move on to the finals. He is one match away from re-qualifying for the Players' Championship.
Congratulations to Steve Mann. Sultai Del